Welcome everyone back to the South End Zone. I am Chad. Tyler is here. Um, big matchup for Georgia. They're playing UMass. We're not even making a graphic. We're not even talking about it. If y'all don't watch them, we'll just end the show. That'll be it. Don't forget everybody while you're here to like, to share, and to subscribe because you want to be subscribed because if Georgia does lose to UMass, you want to make sure you remember to come back and shit all over Tyler in the comments because why not? Speaking of taking a dump on a team, Vanderbilt, we're worried about Vanderbilt right now in Tiger Stadium. What? This is like the last bit of hope I have left. We have to beat Vanderbilt just so that I can keep trolling Alabama fans with, yes, I know you beat us. I know you beat us. But you lost to Vanderbilt. LSU welcomes the Commodores into Tiger Stadium. 7.5 point favorites. I don't know. I'm at the point now where you saw the thumbnail that I made for episode we made earlier this week. That it's just Brian Kelly with a puzzled, angry look on his face,
Yeah.
and dumpster fire as the caption. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are. LSU is
Yep.
in dumpster fire territory. I have no idea whether I should expect us to roll through Vanderbilt like hot butter, or if this is just going to be like a continuation of the downward slide into oblivion, and that I'm just hoping and praying that they can hang on to this number one recruiting class so that we can actually have some sort of hope for the future of this program because it's looking ugly right now, Tyler. We went from being on the brink of taking over the SEC to we are a bottom dweller now. I don't know how this happens, but
I don't know either.
I think what we got was you saw the South Carolina, everything that everybody was saying about us getting lucky in South Carolina and having some calls go our way. Maybe that was all true. Maybe we got lucky with Ole Miss and that was all true. And this team has just been fool's gold all along.
Yeah.
And they were just stringing me along to make me think that there was a reason to have hope. The secondary is not good. The linebacking core, we have basically two guys. We have some young guys starting to step up, but there's some serious holes in this defense, especially like the interior of the defensive line is it struggles at times. Good rush off the edge, but it's just that's where we are right now with LSU football. Is the defense is still a work in progress. I think Blake Baker did a really good job of through smoke mirrors and aggressiveness patching up some of those holes early in the year, but now there some of those holes are being massively exposed. And if Diego Pavia is even remotely healthy, he might give LSU fits as well because they've had
Yeah.
trouble with the running game.
My thought kind of now at LSU is for me on the outside looking in, is Brian Kelly really the fit at LSU? And here's what like my thoughts since he's been there. It
Mm-hmm.
was like the thing for Brian Kelly being a phenomenal recruiter at a place like Notre Dame, where you are in a sense as a recruiter handicapped by say because they have a certain academic standard that you have to still meet.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like a region in which Notre Dame is an institution, but the type of people they bring in, right?
Right.
Offensive linemen and tight ends. That's like your
Mm-hmm.
bread and butter. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
But
And
when you
like
bring
your
that,
standard quarterback
yep,
type guy,
yeah,
with the exception of like a was it Everett Golston and
right,
some of these other guys where it's a little bit different,
yeah.
but usually it's the big fair haired blonde
Listen, handsome as
Rick,
can be, Sam Hartman,
right, Rick
handsome as can be.
Meyer,
Yeah,
all these guys, like it goes back Joe Montana,
right.
all the way back.
Baby blue eyes, could be
Uh-huh.
in a commercial for be a model. Anyway.
Right.
But he comes down to Baton Rouge, fakes a Southern accent,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're like, okay. It just seems like he's getting into like these little weird arguments with players on the side. Like my dad pointed out, I guess in Florida, if you zoom in real good, you can see him telling one of his players that they're uncoachable to their like right in their face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if how well this LSU team might actually be bought into Brian Kelly from an outside
Mm-hmm.
looking in perspective. I don't know. If he brings in the recruits, like you said this before, if he
Yeah.
brings in the recruits and then they still fall flat, then what do you do? Like
Yeah.
what is your opinion on Brian Kelly's leash as the coach at LSU?
Yeah, so it's I'm glad you asked that question because it's where this conversation pretty much has to go, and notwithstanding the outcome this upcoming weekend, just knowing what I know right now, just looking at things as level-headed as I can. On the one hand, I was not thrilled with the hire off the jump because I knew he had the history of not winning big games. I
Hmm.
knew that, yes, while it's hard to recruit at Notre Dame, you also don't have the challenge of playing in a conference.
That's
The
true.
schedule's pretty easy. You're playing like Army, Navy, Cal, Stanford,
USC.
USC. You know what I mean? Like, well,
Yeah.
USC is actually a tough one.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
has been a tough one. That was one of the tougher games on their schedule. But no,
Yeah.
it's usually this Cincinnati, Michigan State. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
Purdue. Like it's not
They
a
get to keep their
juggernaut
historic
schedule.
games from 50 years ago that they
Yeah,
get to keep on the
Northwestern and
schedule.
all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So on that hand, I was like, look, man, I don't know if he's got what it takes to coach at LSU. Number one, the SEC is a whole different ball game. He's had the struggles in big games. Only had one win against I think like top 10 teams. He was like 1-7 while he was at Notre Dame against top 10
Pretty
teams.
sure it was in
The
a
one
Clemson.
win was against Clemson
Yep.
early in the
Without Trevor
season,
Lawrence, right?
and then they turned around and lost to Clemson
Yeah.
at the end of the year when they were part of the ACC as the ACC championship. Um, because that was like that weird year where they had to like make all these makeshift conferences to make them have actual games to play because of all the lockdown stuff and everything. So anyway, um, I had my reservations, and I also had my reservations about like that connection from where he's from versus like how the culture is down here. But then I kind of couched a little bit of it in like, okay, Nick Saban's from West Virginia, was coaching at Michigan State, came down to here, and he like took over Louisiana so much so that he continued to own Louisiana when he went to Alabama and got a lot of the major recruits that Alabama is famous for out of Louisiana. So in that sense, I was like, okay, well, maybe let me give him the benefit of the doubt, and let's see how this Brian Kelly experiment works. And then you see year one, we beat Alabama. It's a little rocky to start, but he inherits a roster that had 39 scholarship players in their bowl game the year
Hmm.
before. We had a cornerback playing quarterback in our bowl game. Like the cupboard was bare when he got here, and through Jaden Daniels in the transfer portal, a solid job recruiting late in the game in that recruiting cycle, getting everything together, patching things together with some veteran guys on the defensive line, the offensive line, and in the secondary, and adding a few other little pieces, and of course, like I said, adding Jaden Daniels. It was rough to start, but then remember, a couple of years ago, we're talking about LSU. If they go into Texas A&M and M and College Station and beat them, we're playing Georgia in the SEC championship for a potential bid into a 14 playoff if
Hmm.
LSU wins. They lose that game to A&M. They lose the SEC championship to Georgia. You still end up with a 9-4 season, and a bowl game win, against a Purdue team that kind of had the same situation LSU had a couple years back, with almost no scholarship players. So that was a really good first year, and you're like, okay, let's see what we got. So then we come into next year, and it's more transfer portal weird stuff. The number 7 recruiting class, not bad, but lose some dudes to the portal, pick up some kind of the thing is when you go to the portal and what you get out of the portal is other people's castaways,
Yeah.
or some of these guys who like couldn't get real D1 scholarships. They got these low end D1 scholarships
Yeah.
because they run a 4.6 40 and they're playing corner. That's tough in the SEC. Trying to keep up with Ole Miss and Alabama's wide receivers and Georgia's wide receivers. Um, so naturally, and then also like he fired um, Corey Raymond, Frank Wilson, Tommy Moffitt, the strength coach. Like he got rid of a lot of people who had been mainstays at LSU for a long time. Now he's brought Corey Raymond back. He's brought Frank Wilson back. Got rid of Steeples as the defensive coordinator. He had Brian Polian as um, the special teams coordinator. There were a bunch of things where it's like he made some mistakes with his hiring and with how he handled the portal, and he rectified them coming into this year. And you can see that he's starting to turn things around with their recruiting class, going after a better stud riddled freshman class rather than trying to go patch it together with veteran guys who went to Nebraska and Southeastern and
Hmm.
ULL and Tulane or something. You know, like
Yeah.
he's actually going and getting dudes who are like top 100 in the country.
Hmm.
So how much rope do I give him? I give him this recruiting class. Let's see how they perform next year, and then I give him the following year where these last couple of recruiting classes are sophomores and juniors, and the upcoming recruiting class, which is supposed to be really good in 2026. That group of freshmen, that's where like the entire roster is his, and he has no
Yeah.
one to blame but himself. I think right now you can even still say that there's some of this that is still him trying to rebuild what was a dumpster fire of a roster that he inherited
Yeah.
and trying to piece that back together. But you don't have that excuse anymore 2 years from now. The other thing is the buyout.
Yeah. What do you think the
To
school allows for
you
him? What do
still
you
owe
think?
him $70 million or so right now.
Yeah. Whew.
By next year, you'll owe him 60. By the year after that, you'll owe him around 50. So as you get further down that road, that buyout becomes less painful as well. So you get the benefit of letting him play this recruiting string out, and also carrying through with that with the financial burden that you have placed on yourself by giving him $100 million contract. So that's kind of where I am right now. Is Brian Kelly has
Yeah.
until 2026 to prove himself, and if the best we can hope for is to not even make the SEC championship and not even make the college playoff, then the standard at LSU is he's got to go.
I was gonna say, yeah. What do you think I know what leash you give him. Do you
Hmm.
think the school gives him that same amount depending on how the rest of this year goes and the next year goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Because they
I
owe
think
him a
they're
lot of
probably
money. I guess they kind of have to,
yeah, I
right?
think they're probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking.
Yeah,
That it's a money thing, and it's also like, why did you do this if you were going to pull the plug after year three?
for sure. I was just curious.
Because
Like,
you really, I mean, you literally gave him chicken shit, and he's trying the best he can to make chicken
yeah,
salad out of it.
yeah.
And so I think you've got to give him enough time to do that. So
Fair
I,
enough.
I think it's only fair to him and fair to the decision that you made to hire him in the first place to do that. But you've got to start the same way that he did with bringing getting rid of the people, getting rid of Matt House and bringing in
Yeah.
Blake Baker, to try to fix a defense that was atrocious last year,
Hmm.
that is a little less atrocious this year, but it still has some major holes and some major problems with just stopping the run, which is crazy. Um, but the administration has to look at it the same way. That look, it's at some point it's fish or cut bait,
Yep.
and so I think let him fish for this, next couple of recruiting classes, and then we see what the outlook is. But this weekend with Vanderbilt, I don't think it's going to have any impact one way or the other on the recruiting class or on the future of Brian Kelly and the program. It's going to look really ugly if they lose this game. You go out, you win this game, you beat Oklahoma, get a decent bowl game, go win that, and or at least be respectable in that game against hopefully a high quality opponent that also didn't make the playoff. Um, and then you're still looking okay, not what you had planned for or hoped for this season, but it's still, it gives you something to build on for next year. You lose one of these last two games, or God forbid both of them,
Yeah.
and then you're playing in like a trash bowl. It won't even matter if you beat them. It's going to be like you're going to have a whole off season of um you better make some earthquake type moves to
Oh yeah,
rectify things.
especially
So,
if it fucks. Excuse me, if it screws up like the recruiting situation, if like the last
oh
couple
yeah,
games, like if he
if
screws
anything
your
happens
recruiting
to this
classes,
recruiting class, where if you don't get Bryce Underwood and then some other dominoes start to fall, it's going to be rough. It's going
yeah,
to be very very rough.
yeah.
So, I don't want to talk about LSU
I know.
anymore.
Sorry, I
We've beaten it to
apologize.
death. It's
I wanted
it's
to ask the
fine.
questions. You know,
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So, keeping it in the SEC though, Ole Miss is going into Trap City in the Swamp.
I feel that way at least.
Yeah.
It's. I feel that there's 2 trap games in the SEC this weekend, and I know we're gonna get the other one later.
Mhm.
I think that is, I think -10 is definitely the number that this should be, like no doubt about it. Like
Mhm.
if all things considered happen the way they should, I think Ole Miss handles Florida with ease.
Yeah,
However,
anything bigger than 10, and I would be like,
yeah,
I would be probably more okay with it than if it was a tighter spread.
yeah,
If it was like 3 or 4, I would be like,
yeah,
wait, what the hell is up? But
yeah,
maybe up to 16, 17, I would still be like, you're doubting Florida too much, but I kind of get it because they could beat them by 40. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. However, I think that there is this is a noon game to be fair. However, going down to the swamp is one of the hardest places to play in the SEC, no matter what
You
you
don't
got
say.
going on. With 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 Billy Napier
Yes.
still trying to make something out of his season.
Hey, look, and I'll say this much: the fact that they have been playing better lately and that they
Yes.
knocked LSU off,
Yeah.
I think actually makes them more dangerous now
I think so too. They
because
have something to play with.
there's some belief that they're starting to play with.
Yeah, because they still have to. They're still fighting for bowl eligibility. They're 5-5 right
Mm-hmm.
now. So like
Yep.
they're still they're at the crossroads of their season. And
Mm-hmm.
Billy Napier, I know, is going to try to at least want to coach a bowl eligible team to finish out what was a crazy season
Right.
for his squad. I think
Yep.
DJ Lagway being healthy and playing in this game makes a big difference. I think we
Mm-hmm.
talked about before DJ Lagway playing against Texas would have made a massive difference. Um,
Yes.
but you know, if that Florida
Didn't
D
happen.
line gets some pressure,
Mm-hmm.
I think. But no, Lagway on the other hand also has to be ready for Ole Miss to be coming down the line
Yeah.
here because I
Yep.
think that that's going to be a problem. I don't know. Florida's front guys are definitely better than their secondaries. That's going to be just
Mm-hmm.
if Jackson Dart is a clean pocket, this game is, you know,
Yeah, it's gonna
you
be
know what I mean.
tough for Florida. Yeah.
It's going to be very tough for Florida to say the least.
But
Um,
also like Lagway gives Florida an opportunity to do some different things than some
that
other
is not an easy guy to
teams
tackle,
that
at
have had.
least
Yeah.
visibly. It does not look like an easy. It's not like they're chasing Carson Beck around. Like you're chasing
Right.
that's a runaway truck if he gets his
Mm-hmm.
legs moving.
Yeah,
Um,
and like just his escapability and his
right.
ability to stay upright even when he's
Hmm.
got some trash around him. He could probably keep plays alive a little bit longer than obviously than Garrett Nussmeier did. But you talked about Texas.
Uh-huh.
Texas has one that's not exactly a cakewalk either, although they are 20.5 point favorites at home against Kentucky. But I think this is one of those little weird Mike Stoops spots where everybody's just talking about this game next weekend with A&M at Kyle Field, and everybody's already got Texas looking at their strength of schedule and everything else, and oh, none of this matters. It's all coming down to Kyle Field and Texas A&M, and I'm just like, yeah, Mike
Listen, both
Stoops could
teams might be looking
coach them
ahead. I'm
up.
just saying, both Texas and Texas A&M could get caught looking too far ahead.
Yep.
Like the fact that bonfire game has all the implications it possibly could have in the first year they finally get to play it again is insane. First of all, college game day is like for sure going there, right? Like that's
I can't see it
yeah,
not going there. Yeah.
yeah. So look, I think that I don't think the trap for Texas is here. I think
Hmm.
it's more like they have to beat A&M next week. However,
Hmm.
Kentucky could. We have to. I feel like Stephen A. Smith, where I have to say all this nonsense and then say, however,
However,
I I have to
it should
play
not
both
happen.
sides. You know what I
However,
mean?
it could happen. Yes,
However, it
exactly.
could.
It could happen.
Have
Well,
to,
so let's jump to that one. Texas A&M at Auburn, a 2.5 point
Jordan Hare
spread, but
night.
they're playing at Jordan Hare. Like it, this is we talked about it earlier this week. Hugh Freeze hasn't jumped up and gotten anybody yet this year. Is this the one? Because I don't think it happens next week in the Iron Bowl,
I don't think so
not in
either.
Tuscaloosa,
No,
but
I
at
think
home against A&M when
yeah,
A&M is also. being told and believing that next weekend is the end all be all for their season. Does Hugh Freeze have a rabbit up the hat, up his ass somewhere? It's
I think. Listen, it's Texas A&M, right? And I think have they officially beaten the Texas 8-4 allegations? Have they officially
They
done
have
that? Yes,
not. They have
they're
not
eight
beaten the
and
Texas
two.
State in
They're
four
8-2.
allegations. If they
Yeah.
lose the next two, they are Texas 8-4 all
Yep.
over again.
They have not officially beaten Texas 8-4 allegations. So it's 8-2 right now. Look at Auburn. Listen, Jordan. We listen. We've seen it enough. Jordan Hare at night, crazy, the craziest of crazy stuff can happen.
Mm-hmm.
We've been victims of it before. Let's say like Nick Marshall and whatever.
Trey Mason.
Yes, I say it could easily. Once again, one of those games that Texas A&M should win and
Mm-hmm.
should win fairly convincingly.
Right.
However, like you said, Hugh Freeze has not jumped up and gotten anybody just yet here in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
And with Texas A&M having to play for their season next week, for their shot in the SEC championship next week,
Mm-hmm.
they could. I don't think that Mike Elko. Somebody I heard it today. That apparently Elko in an interview said.
Oh yeah, he said no. It was in his press conference.
It was
They
yeah.
were asking him if they were having any trouble staying focused, and he's like, "We are fully focused on Texas. I mean Auburn this week."
Yeah.
It's like clearly not, bro. Like you can't even say it right, bro. Like you still you.
I take
We're
the
not looking
Rachel.
ahead to Texas. We are fully focused on Texas. I mean
Dude,
Auburn.
that's hilarious.
Damn. So and the other thing I was gonna say too with that is they're coming off of 2 weeks ago getting embarrassed at South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had a bye week to just stew in that.
They haven't proven themselves on the road very
And
heavily
all
this year.
they have right now is that loss and looking ahead to Texas.
Right.
And in the middle is this thing that I don't know that they have fully addressed. And that is Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers coming right for their throats and saying, "Come on in. It's time to come into the Lions' den or the Tigers' den or the Plainsmen's den or the War Eagles' den,
Yep.
whichever one it is. They're schizophrenic. I've come up with this thing like if you live in Alabama, you have to be schizophrenic because you can't tell if you're an elephant or a wave of blood or something. Like you're a Crimson Tide or you're an elephant. You're a
Yeah.
Plainsman or you're a Tiger or you're a War Eagle. Pick one. Y'all need to figure out who the hell you are because it's making the rest of us sick. I have a question for you though.
What's up?
If Missouri loses to Mississippi State on the road, do they still stay at number 23? Because it doesn't matter, apparently, when they lose to South Carolina, they still stay at number 23.
They have
What the hell do they have to do
they
to not
have
be in the top
they
25?
have been ranked. I think they haven't officially ever dropped out their rankings at any point in
I don't
time
think
this year,
so.
have they?
No.
Listen, you want to talk about Mississippi
Well, they were
State
undefeated until they got embarrassed by Texas A&M.
right, and Mississippi State being what they are, like they gotta get the cowbells will be cowbelling, and I don't know. Listen, anything can happen. I think that I don't even know anything. Here's the thing about this college. This what we the way that I've had to preface everything I've said to in this episode is the perfect microcosm of what college football has been this year, in the sense of like quite literally, when the referee blows that whistle until double zeros in the fourth quarter, we've seen that anything is possible. Vanderbilt can
If
be
you don't
Alabama.
believe it, ask Louisville.
Right.
Anything is possible.
So Vanderbilt can be, Alabama. Louisville can choke a 7-point lead with 50 seconds left. Anything is possible. Will Howard can slide with 3 seconds left. Anything is possible in this year of college football. And there's zero foregone conclusions. I think the only team that is guaranteed safe right now is Oregon. That's literally it.
Yeah.
We're talking about we go from 4 to 12, and we're still having this much murkiness as to where things are going to land. It's pretty awesome. But like for people that are trying to make this is going to happen and this is why, it's very difficult because Mississippi State could say, yeah, ranked Mizzou, come on in. Let's stun somebody because they have really tried. Like they gave us Like they gave us a little bit of work in Athens, by the way.
Yeah,
And I believe they played Texas in Austin, right?
and Texas A&M too.
Right,
It was like little 10-point,
right.
17-point wins, and they were closer than that, and then they pulled away.
Like
The teams pulled away
they
late,
made it look good until the team like
and
put a couple insurance points on the
and they're
board.
still looking for their first win. That's one of those. It's kind of like you're shutting a team out, and they just put one drive together because they're like,
Yeah,
by God, we are going to score. We're
yeah,
not getting shut out
yeah. Right.
by any means necessary. We are scoring. I
Yes.
feel like that's kind of where Mississippi State is right now. They're like, we are not going over in the
Hmm.
SEC. We are not going to become Vanderbilt. Speaking of Vanderbilt, who lost to Vanderbilt? Alabama lost to Vanderbilt this year. Will they lose to Oklahoma in Norman? This spread is a little tight
You want to talk
when
about
you
two
consider how
roads?
bad Oklahoma has been and how good Alabama has been. So I feel like we look, man. We've been talking about it all year. Chaos has showed its head in some of the weirdest spots where once we think we know something and we're like, no, like I mean, I get it, but no, there's no way Alabama's losing to Oklahoma. That's when it happens.
Yeah,
So
dude.
like, I'm not putting
Seriously,
anything past anything at this
I want
point.
to ask: do you think that when we were talking about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, that
Hmm.
Oklahoma would have played themselves almost into being irrelevant for the entire college football season?
Bro, no,
Like like that, like Oklahoma being like multi-time Big 12 champs. You know, the
yeah,
Baker Mayfield, the Mark Andrews, the CeeDee Lamb, the Hollywood Brett, like those guys of the world, like the
they
Oakland, like
haven't,
like literally, like they say two. What is it? The two roads diverge in the wood, and
dude.
Texas went one way, and
It's
Oklahoma the
not
other
just
way.
that. It's not just that, bro. They haven't even had a hard schedule.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
Like
this is the
if you
hardest.
look
This
at
is the best team they played this year, right? Other than Texas, I guess.
yeah, if you look at their schedule, it's Tennessee and Texas and not much else. Let me
And
pull
they
it up
lost
here.
those games.
Yeah,
So
they lost. That's what I'm saying. They lost those games. They lost to Auburn, right? Or no, they barely beat Auburn. They
Auburn
Auburn threw a
Auburn beat
pick.
themselves.
Auburn threw a pick six late. That's right. I remember now.
Auburn beat themselves.
I had forgotten that Auburn had
That's what I mean.
choked that one
Oklahoma
away.
is so irrelevant in the course of college football this year. It's insane.
They did beat Tulane, which that's like Tulane is actually good this
Yeah,
year.
I know they are.
But yeah, they lost by 10 to Tennessee. They lost 34 to 3 to Texas. They lost 26-14 to Ole Miss. They lost 35 to 9 to South Carolina. They have beaten Maine.
35-9.
They beat Maine, Temple, Houston, Tulane, and Auburn. Those are their wins. Their losses are Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Missouri. Now, in their defense, those losses are some tough teams to beat.
But they got embarrassed by a couple of those teams.
But yeah, you got embarrassed by a couple of those, and you didn't beat any of them. That's the thing. Like your signature win is against Tulane,
Right.
and it's a good win. Like don't get me wrong. Like I
I
shout out to
just feel
Tulane.
bad
They're
for
actually
them because
good, but
Oklahoma being such a college football blue blood and staring at the season they've had this year just kind of sucks. I think Alabama whoops them. I really do. This is not
yeah, they
the.
should.
I think Alabama's going to chalk the rest of the season out, and then they just have to wait to see who they get to play. That's really like
Hmm.
that's the listen. No matter how we're just gonna pretend they never lost to Vanderbilt
Hmm.
in Tennessee,
Right,
but
right.
we're gonna pretend that never even happened because it doesn't matter now
Yeah.
because they're going to win these next two games, play in the SEC championship, and by God, even if they lose it, they're probably still going to be in, and
Oh
that's
yeah, they're gonna
Alabama.
find a way to make them like, and
Greg
they're not just
Sankey
gonna
will
be
not
in. They're
let
gonna
them
be
out.
like the 8 seed, so that they get a
Yeah,
home
they're going to
game.
host. Yeah, oh for sure. If
Yeah.
Alabama's in the playoff, they're hosting in Tuscaloosa. If they can't have a bye, they're going to host. That's just how that's.
Hmm.
Alabama's not playing a road game
Yeah.
first first round unless it's a team gets a team like unless it's Notre Dame or some like nonsense like that or like Indiana or some nonsense like
I
it's
think once they lost to Tennessee, Nick Saban put the call in, and he was like, "Hey, look, this has got to stop.
yeah.
Whatever needs to happen, make sure that these guys don't miss the playoff this
Yeah,
first
I
year,
mean,
the
I mean,
12-team
Alabama's
playoff."
played well since those two losses. To be fair, I
Yeah.
mean, so it's not like I mean, other than like they should have lost to South Carolina, and then we're really
Hmm.
that's the most annoying part. Alabama gets on the cusp of being out and then never
Yeah.
falls over the whole way. It's like you're talking about one play against Auburn where they could have been out. You're talking about one play against South Carolina where they could have been out. I think
Hmm.
Alabama chalks it out the rest of the season, and they just have to wait for their opponent in the SEC
Yeah.
championship.
No, I agree with you there. So, two teams that can't just chalk their way through, Indiana and Ohio State. Ohio State with that one loss to Oregon early in the year. So apparently, if you lose the one major game, well, okay, you can get Penn State, all right, but when you look at it, like, all right, what's Penn State's resume? A loss to Ohio State, and that's it. An almost loss to USC, who's like 5-5 now. Um, I don't know. What are we talking about here? How much better than Indiana really is Ohio State at this point in
We're
terms of
gonna find
resume?
out, dude. Like we're gonna really find out because Ohio State lost their most important game already. Like
Mhm.
this is now their second. What's crazy is we're talking about Ohio State's two most important games this season are not Michigan, which is crazy. When you
Wow,
really think
yeah, I
about it,
didn't even think about that. That's crazy.
like Ohio State still has to play Michigan
Oh,
next
there are
weekend.
three. Their three most important games are
Yeah,
not Michigan, Oregon, Penn
Indiana
State,
and
and now
Indiana.
Indiana.
So is that crazy? Like how the
Michigan
flip
is
that
their
we
fourth most important game this
if
year.
that. Like
So when you're talking about playing in an important game,
yes.
one of the things you have to ask yourself is, do I want to play my starting quarterback in this game?
Well, apparently Joey
Because
Galloway.
that's what the retard Joey Galloway said on
Yeah,
national television.
dude. Let me. So
What
for
in
those
the
who
hell
didn't
are we
watch,
talking about, Joey Galloway? What classes did you take
this is
at
the
Ohio State?
first.
Do
This is
y'all
the.
have to go to school at Ohio State, or do you
This
just
is
play football? Because that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of. Bench your starting quarterback when you're
to save
undefeated
him.
and you're playing the number 2 team in the country on the road. Are
Like,
you joking?
no, because the thing is that he's not joking. Like I don't know what kind of backwards like that he had to adjust. And Booger and they were looking at like last night was the first time that I have actually sat and watched the unveiling of the rankings. Um, and Galloway's like, you know what? And his justification for a set,
He's
he
so
literally,
no, he's so in, like he's like completely bought in, like dead
dude,
ass. He's just
dude,
like
so serious.
he's like, no,
He
I would do it. I
he
would do it.
referenced he referenced Jordan Travis getting his leg broken in a throwaway game against North Alabama as the reason, and then undefeated Florida State then missing the playoff as
Right.
the reason why Indiana should bench Curtis Rourke in the biggest game of, and they said it today, Understated Roughness, the biggest game in the history of Indiana football, possibly.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
quite literally, and I don't think that's even an
Mhm.
exaggeration. Um, like
I
I,
wish it was in Bloomington though.
dude,
Like
I
that would
wish
be
so
so
badly.
lit. Oh my
But
god, it
I
would be
wish so
so
badly.
fantastic.
I've like, and I guess like the way the committee's looking at it for them right now is that as long as Indiana, if they lose, keeps it close, I guess they're
Hmm.
still gonna be in.
Because it's
Maybe
on the road and
it's on
it's
the road.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
However, if Ohio State loses this game, where do they land in the playoff rankings? Because then
No, for real. Like what are we doing? Like
we haven't even talked about
and
that
so
as a possibility.
that's why I think Joey Galloway said what he said, is because he doesn't want Ohio State to lose because he's
Right.
an
He
alum
was
and
so serious. He
he
was so
wants
serious.
them to bench their quarterback so that Ohio
Was
State doesn't
not
have to play him.
joking.
He
Like
did not say that Dylan Gabriel should be benched for
yeah.
Oregon. No. Did he say Will Howard should be benched for Ohio State? No. Did he mention any other schools benching their starting quarterback? Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. Should you bench both of them for Texas? You play in
Yeah.
Kentucky. Like, no. Are you an idiot? Are you kidding me? You're playing. This is the biggest game of the season for you so far. And your idea is to bench. First of all, you're saying that they haven't played anybody yet, Joey Galloway. So how can you say they haven't played anybody yet? And then when they finally get their test, let's pull the goalie. That way,
Yeah.
when we lose, we'll just be able to make the excuse that it's because we benched our starting quarterback, but we're trying to keep him healthy for the playoff. Like,
Yeah.
are you out of your mind?
Yeah,
I don't
dude.
know. It's just,
How do you think this game shakes out? Like Signetti's already, I think he's locked up coach of the year.
yeah.
What do you think this game actually plays out? Do you think Indiana makes this a game?
The only thing I would say with, all right, so Signetti, coach of the year, unless SMU wins the ACC
That's a good
and
point.
Indiana falters. If Indiana falters and SMU wins the ACC, then I think it's going to be tight.
Yeah.
If Indiana beats Ohio State and goes to the Big Ten championship game, and holy crap, if they beat Oregon, then how is he not the
Oh my
coach
god.
of the year? You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So, do I think that's going to happen? I don't know. Like, Indiana's weird in that, like, they've played really well defensively. They've run the ball really well, and you know they've done enough offensively, even when he was hurt
Mm-hmm.
and had like his thumb like reattached or whatever, and you know even when he didn't play, they were like, no, we're good. We got this anyway, and they've been smoking people left and right. So. Um, with the exception being that Michigan game where we kind of saw that coming.
But
You're going
like
on the road to Ann
that's like
Arbor, and
like you're allowed to regress a little bit and still win.
yeah.
Like we talk about that all the time, and we've especially in reference to my team that the best
Why
thing
should
for a
Alabama get
team,
a pass for doing that shit
right?
against South Carolina and Indiana doesn't get it against Michigan?
The best thing for your team is narrowly escaping a win, and you
Against a
still
tough team
against a
too.
tough team. Like it's still
hmm
Michigan. I mean, Michigan can't execute an offensive play, but like
Right.
Michigan still like gave them a run. It's still there. It's and you know what's hilarious that Michigan is still the reigning national champions, regardless of whatever that means for them this year. Not a whole
Right.
lot, but
They're kind of I think we can officially put them in lame duck status because they
yeah,
cannot win the Big Ten, they cannot make the playoff, and so they are a lame duck reigning national champion.
yeah,
But yes, they are still the reigning national champion for a few more weeks.
yeah, dude. But hey, listen, I'm pulling for Indiana so hard for just for
hmm
chaos and for
Right.
just like new schools, like and just it just shows why the 12-team playoff is so worth it for games like
hmm
this where Indiana's playing for their and Ohio State is playing for this season, whether people
Yeah.
admit it
Hey
or not.
Jeremiah, does this game count? Um, does this regular season game matter?
Yeah, I will see,
Anyway, I
man.
love you,
Uh,
Jeremiah. It's
yeah,
all
we
jokes.
love you, but yeah,
Yeah.
I want I want Indiana to win, but I'm like I don't know if they can do it, but we're gonna find
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, we're gonna find out. So one team I will tell you that I definitely want to win is Wake Forest at Miami, because Miami's a fraud and they deserve to be continuously exposed as much as possible. They're 24.5 point favorites. You better win that game, Miami, or you're done. You're not making the playoff. You're not even making the ACC championship game, and your playoff hopes are over at that point, because there's no way you're going to give a two-loss Miami that hasn't beaten anyone all year that uh, that much leeway. SMU, Virginia. Now, this is a little bit of a sneaky one. Virginia's not very good, but they're solid. They're okay enough to where they gave Clemson a little bit of trouble a couple of weeks ago until Clemson eventually pulled away and ran away with it. SMU riding high right now, but they've got to take care of their business and finish this thing off so that they can actually get to that ACC championship
Mhm,
game. And then I think at that point, provided they win out, Miami wins out, it's them two in
mhm.
the championship game, and then I'm pulling all hands on deck for the Pony Express.
Oh, for sure. I'm all in on the Pony Express and SMU winning the ACC this year. Like, it's just and funny enough, it's like and people, all the Miami fans in the comments, is like Chad and I were like fairly high on Miami earlier in the season, and Cam Ward,
Yes.
he was a high profile transfer. We knew
hmm
that. Like we understood what him playing for Miami meant, but it's just
It became
Miami.
less and less
Right,
impressive as it
it
went on.
did exactly, and like he's just kind of like nonchalantly like pulling stuff, like pulling wins out of his ass to keep them
hmm
alive. Like,
But it's not
um,
against good teams, though. That's the thing.
right.
It's like it would be
That's
one
the
thing
point
if
we're
you were
making.
playing against some competition. You haven't played Clemson, you haven't played SMU, you haven't played Pitt, you haven't played like the teams that were good in your conference.
Right,
Even
they've
you
skated
played
by.
all
They
the
got to
worst
play
teams in your
1 and
conference
9
and a
Florida
bad
State.
SEC team.
Right.
So,
So that's how we feel. Like right now, we're all in on SMU because like
mhm.
they're taking care of their business and they're not complaining about anything. Like
Right, right,
I'm pretty
exactly.
sure they both have similar kind of
Resumes, yeah,
resumes, and
yeah.
yet SMU is somehow this many spots lower than Miami.
I would say SMU's resume is probably better,
Okay.
but that's neither here nor there. Penn State at Minnesota, another one. Like I really, I'm not saying all of these are going to go the way of the underdog, but there are a lot of these games where I'm looking at it, I'm like, do not be surprised if we
Listen,
have like three of the top 10 get knocked off this weekend
PJ
by
Fleck,
upsets.
PJ Fleck is the ultimate get your team up kind of coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like no matter what the situation may be. So I still really like Penn State here, but I think 11.5 like might be a little steep. I think it's more around a touchdown if I had to really be honest with ourselves here. I think Penn State is not going to falter because, James Franklin's going to handle these games. It's the big games he can't. So
All
I
right.
think this is more around a touchdown.
And I know Penn State is used to this sort of thing, but it's a 2:30 p.m. kickoff. Well, 3:30 Eastern, I guess.
Yeah.
36 degrees according to AccuWeather
Hell yeah.
at game time.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm talking about. A real Minnesota Penn State game.
Yeah, that's true.
A real Big Ten game in November, and that's when it starts to get like, well, I don't know, is it going to be like rainy and like kind of ugly,
That's the other reason it gets
bitter
a
cold?
touchdown. It's just I don't know how many
Yeah,
points are going to truly be scored in this game.
right. No, for sure, for sure. I'm with you on that. So BYU, speaking of teams that struggle to score, BYU has struggled a lot to score here in the last few weeks. They travel to Arizona State, and this is one where the Sun Devils sit there with that 3-point edge from Vegas, and they are actually still in line to potentially make it to the Big 12 championship game. Some things have to happen, but beating BYU is one of them, because right now BYU is one of the teams that's ahead of them in the standings that would get into that game ahead of them, along with Colorado. But we're here at a point where we could have some weird nobody really predicted it Big 12 championship game,
For
some
sure.
weird nobody predicted it ACC championship game, some weird nobody predicted it SEC championship game
At this point, the only thing
with
that's a
like Texas
guarantee,
A&M against Ole Miss or
right?
something. You know what I
The
mean? Like,
the only
I don't know what
thing,
the hell's gonna happen.
the
And
only
then and
thing,
then the Big Ten could be Oregon against Indiana.
yeah, right. The only thing that the only constant, literally, is Oregon being in the Big Ten championship. Everything else is
It's
who the hell
everything
knows.
else up for grabs. We don't know what's going on. So keep an eye on that one. Also, Colorado 2.5-point favorites at the Grim Reaper
That's
that
my
is Jalen
coin.
Daniels now. He's just knocking on doors, slashing throats of contenders and saying, "Nah, bitch, not today." Um, how Kansas pulls this stuff off? They beat BYU. They were 3-6 going into that game. Been playing a lot better since Daniels came back. And I don't know, the Vegas odds makers must smell something in the water because BYU was a 2.5, 3-point favorite last week. And now Colorado is only a 2.5-point favorite going on the road to Lawrence to take on
I
Kansas.
wonder how much money flies out on Kansas in this game. I feel
Mm.
like a lot's gonna, like, at least, like, if
Mm-hmm.
you've watched any ball, you'll the money's obviously gonna be on Kansas, but
Yeah.
like we'll have to see. Like I I think that the college football playoff is going to be way more exciting if Colorado is the participant from the Big 12. I
From the
really
Big
do.
12. Absolutely.
I
No, for
really
sure.
do. I think
It
that
makes it to where
Arizona State
whoever
is
they
also
play
a
in the
fun team
first
to
round
watch.
has their work cut out for them.
Right, for sure. But the Big 12 as a whole was just pretty poo-poo terrible this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just across the board. So however it
Yeah.
ends up is kind of however it ends up at this point,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things for us.
Also kind of poo-poo terrible is the American Athletic Conference, but Army still has a chance to get to the championship game and face Tulane if they can knock off Notre Dame. Well, it doesn't really matter because Notre Dame's not a conference opponent, so this won't affect that. But it will give a serious ding to Army's chances
Oh,
of
I'm all in on the troops.
representing the AAC in the playoffs. So, well, no, so like where we are right now is like Tulane or Army, whoever wins the championship, if they're not ranked high enough, Boise State's going to take that spot unless Boise State loses a game for that Group of Five conference championship winner. So speaking of the Broncos, Boise State 22.5-point favorites at Wyoming. Can Ashton Jeanty finally break the 400-yard mark? No, I'm just joking. That would be ridiculous. But he could. Could he eclipse 300? Who knows?
This is the kind of game for him to do it, though. Wyoming
It
is
is.
2-8. Wyoming
It
is the
definitely
bottom of
is.
the barrel when it comes to the Mountain West
Yeah.
Conference. And if he's gonna do it, like if he's gonna put up like a 300-yard rushing game, he's at 1893. So I'm pretty sure he has to rush for 1,000, like
800,
what,
800 more
800 more
yards.
yards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10,
Listen, he has
830,
what?
something like
This
that.
game, another game in the Mountain West Conference, Mountain West
Right.
Conference Championship. Listen, The fact that
It could happen.
the fact that he could have a Samaje Perine type of performance and
Yeah,
put up 400
280
yards
apiece
rushing.
in 3 games straight. Get it done, Big Daddy.
Yeah, come on
You
now.
got it.
Listen. This is the Ashton Genty Heisman podcast. It's
That's
the
right.
SEC and Ashton Genty to win the Heisman podcast. That's literally.
That's right. That's right. Until further notice.
We
That's
respect
right.
ball in this
Hey,
show,
look,
man.
man.
Listen, when you lead all conceivable running back stats, you should be rewarded for that. When you're
Absolutely.
sniffing Barry Sanders' record, you should be rewarded as such.
And I will say this, so because I would do this in any other era, we do have to issue the caveat that even if he breaks Barry Sanders' record, we have to put an asterisk and give Barry his due because Barry did it in far fewer games
For
because
sure.
they just play more games now. So
Yeah,
to think of the fact that Barry Sanders did that in 11 games is
that's
insane.
insane. That's absurd.
Insane. And he was doing that in a Big 8 conference that had Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, or no, wait, no, I'm sorry, no, Texas and Texas A&M were in the Southwest Conference. It was Oklahoma, Kansas State, Iowa State, those guys.
Yeah,
But it was still like they had a conference that was pretty well built. Ashton Janty, for all of what he's doing, like he is doing it in the Mountain West Conference. It ain't the
right.
same. And he's doing it with a lot more games. But he did have a hell of a game against a really good Oregon defense in game one. So you can't take that away from him. I don't know that he wouldn't have done just as well or better if he had been playing on a different team in a different conference with a little bit better supporting cast. Because, yes, the competition's not as good, but I think his offensive line, as good as they are, you see they load the box up, it's tough sledding for old Ashton, and somehow he still ends up with like 34 for 260 and 3 tuds every game.
Yeah.
It's insane. Iowa State travels to Utah. The Cyclones try to weasel their way into the Big 12 championship. The Big 12 is weird, like all the way, top to bottom. So we don't know how that conference is going to end up shaking out. A lot of these games these last couple of weeks are really going to have a huge impact on not just that conference and who wins it, but how that ends up impacting the way that the seeding goes for the tournament.
Mhm.
Because a team like Boise State could actually become a first round bye team because the Big 12 champion is going to be so weakened by their strength of schedule, strength of record, and if they have, if you've got a 2 or 3 loss Big 12 team, like if Colorado were to lose a game and then still go in and win the Big 12 championship, then you have like a whole different set of circumstances where like their out of conference loss actually ends up
Mhm.
hurting the Big 12 champion in terms of that bye, and
Yeah.
they end up with the 12 seed instead of a potential 4 seed. So Iowa State, Utah, that's a big one, and we've seen Utah playing, fairly well of late, but just they, their season has not gone the way that they had expected because they were one of the teams that people picked to actually win that conference. So
Mhm.
now they are just trying to play spoiler, kind of like Kansas. Um, so anyway, but that's I don't know if you got anything else
I do not.
for
I'm just
for this week's show.
ready to
Yeah,
see how things shake out over the next 2 to 3 weeks. This is where
yeah, no doubt.
this is leading up to conference championship week and rivalry week.
Mhm.
There's a lot of teams playing some very meaningful football down the stretch here, and that's what makes the 12-team playoff so great. That's all I got.
Are you saying that the 12-team playoff has actually made college
You know
football
what, Chad?
regular season games mean more late in the season?
You know what, Chad? I think that's it. That is what I'm saying. I'm glad you brought that up.
Who would have thought? Who could have
Oh,
seen that
not
coming?
Jeremiah.
Shots fired. We love you, Jeremiah. All right. We appreciate everybody coming through, and we will see you back next time. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe, and of course leave all your loving comments because we love to see how much you hate us and how stupid you think we are. We're here for it. We're always trying to improve. So any constructive criticism you can give us, we will take it. But for now, I'm Chad. He is Tyler. This is the South End Zone. We're out of here. Peace, y'all.